My name is Sophia, and I'm a 32-year-old financial analyst at Morgan Stanley in New York. I grew up watching my parents build their Italian restaurant empire with sweat and sacrifice. On paper, my life looks perfect. Great career, nice apartment, financial stability. But behind that success lies a family drama that finally exploded in the worst possible way. Last Tuesday, my parents and sisters stormed into my office screaming about family loyalty and money in front of everyone. Before I tell you how my parents' public meltdown backfired spectacularly, let me know where you're watching from and hit subscribe if family drama hits close to home. Growing up as the daughter of Thomas and Eleanor Wright wasn't easy, despite the outward appearance of success. My parents started Bellini's, their first Italian restaurant, when I was just 4 years old. They built it from nothing, working 16-hour days, often taking me and my younger sister Jasmine to sleep on makeshift beds in the office while they counted receipts late into the night. By the time I was in high school, they had expanded to 3 locations across Connecticut, and by my college graduation, Bellini's had become a regional chain with 12 restaurants. This success story became our family legacy, the thing my parents would reference in every conversation about expectations, responsibility, and duty. I heard the phrase, "after everything we've built," so many times, it became white noise in my childhood. The problem wasn't the family business. The problem was how differently my sister and I were treated within that family narrative. From early on, Jasmine was clearly the favorite. 4 years younger than me, she somehow received every advantage, every excuse, and every luxury, while I was expected to be responsible, practical, and self-sufficient. When I turned 16, I got practical gifts: a used Honda Civic to drive myself to school, and my part-time job, a college savings account contribution, and new sneakers for cross-country. When Jasmine turned 16, she received a brand new BMW convertible, a 2-week trip to Paris, and a designer wardrobe refresh that cost more than my entire college first semester tuition. The contrast wasn't just about material things. My parents attended every one of Jasmine's dance recitals and soccer games, often closing the restaurant to make time. Meanwhile, I received a text message of congratulations when I was named valedictorian, and neither of them attended my debate team state championship. My father claimed they couldn't afford to close the restaurant that day, though they had done exactly that the previous weekend for Jasmine's regional soccer tournament. I learned early on that my role was to achieve and support, while Jasmine's role was to be adored and indulged. By the time I left for college, I had accepted this dynamic, painful as it was. I worked my way through New York University, combining academic scholarships with 20-hour work weeks to pay for my education. My parents contributed exactly $5,000 total to my education, informing me that learning financial responsibility would be good for me. Meanwhile, they fully funded Jasmine's education at Brown, including a luxury apartment off campus and a monthly allowance that exceeded my entire monthly budget. Despite these challenges, or perhaps because of them, I thrived. I graduated summa cum laude with a double major in finance and economics, secured a competitive internship at Morgan Stanley, and converted that into a full-time position upon graduation. Over the past 10 years, I've worked my way up to senior financial analyst managing portfolios for high net worth clients. I bought my own apartment in Brooklyn 4 years ago, built an emergency fund, and created the financial stability I never had growing up. I did all of this without family connections or substantial support. Each achievement was mine alone, earned through late nights, sacrificed weekends, and relentless determination. Meanwhile, Jasmine's post-college journey looked completely different. After graduating with a general communications degree and barely passing grades, she bounced between marketing jobs, never lasting more than 8 months at any position. The pattern was always the same: initial excitement about the amazing opportunity, followed by complaints about her unreasonable boss, culminating in her either quitting or being fired for poor performance. Between these jobs, our parents supported her completely. They paid her rent when she was between opportunities. They covered her credit card bills when she overspent. They even purchased her a condo as a graduation gift, which she promptly sold to fund a 3-month finding herself trip to Southeast Asia. The dynamic remained largely unchanged into our adulthood. At every family gathering, Jasmine was praised for the smallest achievements, while my promotions and accomplishments were met with casual acknowledgement at best. As our parents approached retirement age, they began hinting more strongly about family responsibility and carrying on the legacy. These conversations always seemed directed at me, despite Jasmine being the favorite. It became clear they expected me to eventually step in financially when they could no longer bail out Jasmine themselves. The tension between us had been escalating over the past year. I established firmer boundaries around lending money to my sister after she borrowed $3,000 for emergency car repairs that mysteriously coincided with her posting Instagram photos of a weekend spa retreat with friends. When I confronted her, she laughed it off, saying, "That's what family is for, you make plenty of money anyway." My parents' response when I brought it up was equally dismissive. "She's your sister," my mother said. "Sometimes family members need help. You've always been so rigid about money, Sophia." I had reached my limit with these interactions, but I had no idea how much worse things would get, or how dramatically everything would change after one explosive confrontation. The current crisis began 3 weeks ago, when Jasmine was laid off from her latest position at a digital marketing agency. According to her, the company was restructuring, but I later learned from a mutual friend who worked there that she had been terminated for consistently missing deadlines and showing up late to client meetings. Jasmine's financial situation was already precarious. At 30 years old, she had no savings, maxed out credit cards, and a lifestyle that required far more income than she had ever consistently earned. She lived in a luxury apartment in downtown Manhattan that cost $3,500 per month, wore exclusively designer clothes, and took lavish vacations she couldn't afford. Rather than adjusting her lifestyle to her new reality, Jasmine immediately turned to our parents for help. They were now semi-retired, having sold 8 of their 12 restaurants to a restaurant group 2 years ago. They still maintained a comfortable lifestyle from the remaining 4 restaurants and their investments, but they weren't in a position to indefinitely support Jasmine's extravagance. My mother called to invite me to Sunday dinner at their home in Greenwich, which immediately raised my suspicions. These family dinners were rarely casual gatherings and almost always involved some agenda. Still, I agreed to attend, driving the 90 minutes from my Brooklyn apartment to their 6-bedroom colonial home. The dinner began pleasantly enough, with my father pouring expensive wine and my mother serving her signature lasagna. The other shoe dropped during dessert when Jasmine cleared her throat dramatically. "So, I have a small situation," she announced, twirling her wine glass. "The company downsized my entire department last week, totally out of the blue. And with the job market being what it is, I might need a little help with rent for a couple months. 3 months max." My father nodded sympathetically. "Of course, sweetheart. We're always here for you." My mother reached over to squeeze Jasmine's hand. "It's not your fault the economy is so unstable." I remained silent, focusing on my tiramisu. I'd heard this exact conversation at least 5 times in the past 7 years. The script never changed, nor did the outcome. Then my father turned to me. "Sophia, your mother and I have been thinking. We've helped Jasmine many times over the years, and we're not getting any younger. We think it's time you stepped up for your sister." I put down my fork. "What exactly does stepping up mean?" "Well," my mother interjected, "you're doing so well at your job. You have that big apartment all to yourself. We thought you could cover Jasmine's rent for a few months while she finds a new position. Just until she gets back on her feet." Jasmine smiled at me expectantly, as if this was a completely reasonable request. "It's only $3,500 a month. I know you make way more than that." "Let me get this straight," I said, feeling a familiar tension headache forming. "You want me to pay $3,500 a month for your luxury apartment? That's more than my mortgage payment." "It's not that much to you," Jasmine replied, a slight edge entering her voice. "You've always been so stingy with your money." "Being financially responsible isn't being stingy," I countered. "And have you considered moving to a more affordable apartment? There are plenty of decent places for half what you're paying now." Jasmine looked horrified. "Move to some outer borough shoebox? Are you serious? All my friends are in my neighborhood. My whole life is there." "Then maybe your friends can pay your rent?" I suggested. "Because I won't be doing it." The table fell silent. My mother's expression shifted from expectant to disapproving. Sophia, my father said firmly, this is about family loyalty. Your sister needs help. She needs financial literacy and realistic expectations, I replied. I worked hard for what I have. I took out student loans. I worked through college. I lived with 3 roommates in a tiny apartment for years to save for my down payment. Jasmine has never had to make those sacrifices because you've always bailed her out. That's not fair, my mother snapped. We helped you too. With what? I asked incredulously. The $5,000 total you contributed to my education, the used car you bought me so I could drive myself to my after-school job, the fact that I had to turn down my dream school because you wouldn't help with tuition while you paid for Jasmine's entire Ivy League experience. Jasmine rolled her eyes. Here we go with the pity party again. Not everyone wants to live like a monk, Sophia. Some of us actually enjoy life instead of hoarding money. I don't hoard money, I said through gritted teeth. I save it, I invest it, I use it responsibly. Maybe if you'd learn to do the same, you wouldn't be begging for handouts at 30. Enough, my father shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Sophia, you will help your sister. That's final. Write her a check tonight before you leave. Something inside me snapped. Years of unequal treatment, of swallowed resentment, of being the reliable one, who never complained while watching Jasmine receive everything without effort or gratitude. It all boiled over in that moment. No, I said, standing up. I will not write her a check. Not tonight, not ever. Jasmine is an adult who needs to learn to support herself. And you two need to stop enabling her dependency. My mother gasped as if I'd slapped her. How dare you speak to us like that after everything we've done for you? I laughed bitterly. What exactly have you done for me that you haven't done tenfold for Jasmine? Name one thing. When neither of them answered, I grabbed my purse and jacket. That's what I thought. I'm leaving now. And just to be clear, I will not be paying Jasmine's rent. Not now, not ever. As I walked toward the door, my father called after me. If you walk out that door, you're choosing money over family. Is that really who you want to be, Sophia? I paused, hand on the doorknob. I'm not choosing money over family. I'm choosing self-respect over manipulation. There's a difference. The door closed behind me with a decisive click, but the drama was far from over. Within 20 minutes of leaving their house, my phone exploded with texts and calls. My mother called 17 times in a row. My father sent a series of increasingly angry messages about ingratitude and family obligation. Jasmine alternated between guilt-tripping texts about potentially becoming homeless and vicious messages calling me selfish and heartless. This continued for an entire week. I finally blocked their numbers temporarily so I could focus on a major client presentation at work. I needed space to think clearly without the constant barrage of manipulation. I had no idea that my family would make it impossible to separate my personal drama from my professional life in the most humiliating way possible. The morning that everything changed started like any other Tuesday. I arrived at the Morgan Stanley offices on Broadway at 7:30, carrying my usual almond milk latte and overnight oats. I had a crucial client meeting at 10 with the Thompsons, a wealthy couple looking to restructure their investment portfolio ahead of retirement. My boss, Lawrence Richardson, would be joining the meeting, so the pressure was on to make a perfect presentation. I spent the early morning hours at my desk reviewing my analysis and rehearsing key talking points. Around 9:15, I moved to the conference room to set up my presentation materials and review my notes one final time before Mr. Richardson and the clients arrived. The Thompsons arrived promptly at 9:55, and Mr. Richardson joined us minutes later. We were just beginning the preliminary pleasantries when the conference room door burst open without warning. My father stormed in, his face flushed with anger, followed closely by my mother and Jasmine. The conversation halted abruptly as everyone turned to stare at the interruption. There you are, my father bellowed, pointing at me accusingly. Running away and hiding at work after betraying your family. I froze in complete shock, unable to process what was happening. This couldn't be real. My family couldn't possibly be here in my workplace during the most important client meeting of the quarter. Mr. Richardson stood immediately, extending his hand with remarkable composure. Excuse me, I'm Lawrence Richardson's senior portfolio manager. We're in the middle of a client meeting. Perhaps we could schedule a time to speak later. My father ignored the outstretched hand. This won't take long. My daughter needs to understand what family means. She's destroying her sister's life and our family legacy with her selfishness. The Thompsons exchanged uncomfortable glances. Mrs. Thompson gathered her purse, clearly preparing to leave. I apologize for the interruption, I managed to say, my voice barely audible, as shock gave way to humiliation. Mr. Richardson, perhaps we should reschedule. Reschedule, my mother cried, tears streaming dramatically down her face. While your sister is about to be homeless, how can you be so cold? Jasmine stepped forward, playing her part perfectly. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression wounded. Sophia, I'm going to lose my apartment. I'll have nowhere to go. Is your fancy job more important than your own sister? By now, a small crowd of my colleagues had gathered outside the glass walls of the conference room, drawn by the commotion. I could see them whispering to each other, eyes wide with curiosity and shock. My carefully constructed professional reputation was crumbling before my eyes. Mr. Richardson attempted again to diffuse the situation. I understand this is a family matter, but this isn't the appropriate venue. Perhaps we could move this discussion to a private office. We tried discussing it privately, my father snapped. She blocked our numbers. She walked out of our home. What choice did we have? You had many choices, I said quietly, finding my voice at last. None of them involved bursting into my workplace and disrupting a client meeting. Don't you dare talk about choices, my father shouted, his voice echoing in the conference room. You've chosen money over family. You've chosen to let your sister suffer when you could easily help her. The Thompsons were now standing clearly ready to leave. Mr. Richardson was attempting to salvage the situation, assuring them this was highly unusual. I've worked hard for what I have, I said, struggling to maintain my composure. Jasmine needs to take responsibility for her own finances. She's 30 years old. My mother stepped forward, her voice rising hysterically. Do you know what she spends her money on instead of helping family fancy vacations? An expensive apartment, designer clothes, all while her sister might end up on the street. I felt the blood drain from my face as my mother publicly aired what should have been private financial matters. Colleagues I'd worked alongside for years were now privy to my family drama, hearing a distorted version of my character and choices. Write the check right now, my father demanded, pulling Jasmine forward. 3 months' rent, $10,500. Do it now in front of everyone so we know you mean it. The final thread of my professional composure snapped. I will not be writing any checks. You need to leave immediately before security is called. Jasmine's face contorted with rage. You think you're so perfect, don't you? Should I tell everyone about the time you stole money from Dad's wallet in high school? Or how about the real reason you didn't go to your senior prom? That's enough, Mr. Richardson interrupted firmly, nodding to his assistant, who had appeared at the door. I've asked security to escort you out. This is completely inappropriate behavior. Inappropriate, my father bellowed. What's inappropriate is raising a daughter who betrays her family, who turns her back on her own sister, who cares more about impressing her boss than honoring her family obligations. 2 security guards appeared at the door, and my father's expression shifted from rage to disbelief. He hadn't expected consequences for his actions, just as there had never been consequences throughout my childhood. Ms. Right, one of the guards said gently. Would you like us to escort these people out? Unable to speak through the lump in my throat. I simply nodded. This isn't over, my father called as the guards led them toward the elevator. You're a disgrace to this family, a traitor to your own blood. As they disappeared from view, the full impact of what had just happened crashed over me. The Thompsons were gone, their business likely lost. My colleagues had witnessed my most private family dysfunction. Mr. Richardson was looking at me with a mixture of concern and professional disappointment. I'm so sorry, I whispered, gathering my presentation materials with trembling hands. I had no idea they would come here. Sophia, Mr. Richardson said kindly, take the rest of the day off. We can discuss this tomorrow when things have calmed down. But I couldn't face tomorrow. Couldn't face the whispers, the pitying glances, the damage to my professional reputation. Without conscious decision, I found myself walking to my desk, gathering my personal items, and heading toward the elevator. As the doors closed behind me, I realized I was having a full-blown panic attack. My chest tightened painfully. My vision tunneled, and my hands shook so violently. I dropped my phone twice, trying to call a rideshare. Somehow I made it to the street, gulping the cool October air in desperate breaths. One thought repeated in my mind: I couldn't go back there. Not tomorrow, not ever. My family had finally succeeded in destroying the one thing that was truly mine, the career I'd built without their help or support. In that moment, I made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't just walk away from that meeting, I would walk away from all of it, the entire toxic dynamic that had defined my life for too long. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with, and exactly how far I was willing to go to break free. I spent that night in a hotel, unable to face returning to my apartment where my family might show up unannounced. As I sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the generic hotel artwork, the full weight of what had happened settled over me. My family had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. They had deliberately targeted the one area of my life that was completely separate from them, the career I had built through my own merit and hard work. They had humiliated me in front of my colleagues, boss, and clients, potentially damaging my professional reputation beyond repair. All because I refused to continue enabling Jasmine's financial irresponsibility. I scrolled through dozens of missed calls and messages, each one more manipulative than the last. My mother claimed she was having chest pains from stress. My father threatened to disown me if I didn't apologize and pay Jasmine's rent immediately. Jasmine herself oscillated between vicious insults and claims that I was literally killing her with my selfishness. Not one message contained an apology or acknowledgement that their behavior had been inappropriate. Not one showed any concern for how their actions had affected my career or well-being. As I sat in that impersonal hotel room, memories from throughout my life played through my mind like a movie scenes of unequal treatment and manipulation that I had normalized for far too long. The time my parents canceled our planned trip to Disney World because Jasmine got the flu, only to take her alone 3 months later while I stayed with my grandmother. The Christmas morning when Jasmine received an expensive laptop while I got a sweater and a gift card with my parents, explaining that Jasmine needed it more for her social media interests, while my academic pursuits could be handled with the school computer lab. The countless times my achievements were minimized, while Jasmine's smallest efforts were celebrated with excessive praise and rewards. The pattern was clear and consistent. I had never been valued equally in my family. My role had always been to achieve independently so my parents could focus their resources and attention on Jasmine. And now, as adults, that same dynamic had evolved into an expectation that I would financially support her irresponsibility. Around 2 in the morning, I called the one person I knew would understand, without judgment, my friend Taylor, a therapist I had met in a yoga class 3 years ago. "They showed up at your workplace." Taylor asked, her voice a mixture of shock and outrage after I explained what had happened. "Sophia, that's not just inappropriate, that's abusive." "It feels like they'll never stop," I whispered. "Like they'll keep pushing and manipulating until I give in or completely cut them off." "Those might be your only options," Taylor said gently. "Some family dynamics can't be fixed without everyone being willing to change. From what you've described, your parents and sister don't see anything wrong with their behavior." "What would you do?" I asked, desperate for guidance. Taylor was silent for a moment. "I can't tell you what to do, but I can ask you to consider what maintaining this relationship is costing you, not just financially, but emotionally and professionally. And what would healthy boundaries actually look like in this situation?" That question kept me awake for the rest of the night. What would healthy boundaries look like? The truth was, I had been setting boundaries for years only to have them trampled repeatedly. I had tried talking reasoning distancing, all with no lasting effect. Perhaps the only boundary left was a complete separation. The next morning, I called in sick to work, unable to face the aftermath of yesterday's scene. Then I began researching something that had been bothering me for years: the family business finances. Despite growing up in the restaurant business, I had never been allowed to see the books or participate in financial decisions, unlike Jasmine, who had been given a symbolic vice president title at 18, despite having no responsibilities. My parents had always been secretive about money, even as they leveraged family legacy to make demands of me. Using my financial background and some publicly available information, I began piecing together a troubling picture. The restaurant group that had purchased 8 of my parents' 12 locations had filed complaints about discrepancies in the reported profits versus actual performance. There were indications of potential tax issues, including possible unreported cash transactions. More disturbing were the private loans taken out against the business to fund what appeared to be personal expenses, many coinciding with periods when Jasmine had been between jobs or made large purchases. My parents had been using the business as a piggy bank for years, likely to fund Jasmine's lifestyle while maintaining the appearance of business success. I realized with growing clarity that the family legacy they expected me to eventually take over was not just a successful restaurant chain, but a financial mess that would eventually become my responsibility to clean up. That afternoon, I made an appointment with Jackson Williams, a business attorney recommended by a colleague. I needed to understand exactly what my legal exposure might be as a family member, even though I had no official role in the business. Based on what you've described, Jackson said after I explained the situation, you have no legal obligation for the business debts or potential tax liabilities as long as you've never signed any documents associating yourself with the company. But there's a more immediate concern here. What's that? I asked. The financial and emotional harassment you're experiencing, he replied, leaning forward in his chair. What happened at your workplace goes beyond a family disagreement. It was a deliberate attempt to damage your professional reputation and coerce you financially. We should discuss a formal cease and desist letter and possibly a restraining order if this behavior continues. The phrase restraining order hit me like a physical blow. Was that really where we were? Had my family's behavior become so toxic that legal protection was necessary? What would you recommend I do immediately? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. First, document everything, Jackson advised. Save all texts, emails, voicemails. Note dates and times of any unwanted contact. Second, I'd suggest completely separating your finances if there's any connection. New accounts at different banks, credit freezes to prevent anyone opening accounts in your name, that sort of thing. As I left his office, I felt both heartbroken and resolute. The path forward was becoming clearer, though no less painful. I would need to completely separate myself from my family, not just emotionally, but financially and legally. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Mr. Richardson, my boss. Sophia, he said when I answered, I wanted to check on you. Yesterday was quite a situation. I'm so sorry, I began, but he interrupted me. Don't apologize for your family's behavior, he said firmly. That's not on you. I'm calling because I'm concerned about you, and because I want you to know that your position here is secure. What happened wasn't your fault. His kindness brought tears to my eyes. Thank you, but I'm not sure I can face everyone after what happened. Take the time you need, he replied, but know that you have support here. The Thompsons, by the way, have rescheduled. They were concerned about you, not angry. That conversation was the final piece I needed to make my decision. There were people in my life who respected boundaries, who treated me with dignity even in difficult situations. My family was not among them, and continuing to engage with their toxic behavior would only bring more pain and damage. The next morning, I began systematically cutting ties. I moved my accounts to a new bank. I put a freeze on my credit. I contacted my building's security to alert them about potential unwanted visitors. I drafted a formal letter with Jackson's help outlining exactly why I was ceasing contact and what the consequences would be if they continued to harass me. And then I made the most difficult decision of all. After discovering the extent of the financial irregularities in the family business, I submitted an anonymous tip to the IRS and the state tax authority about potential tax evasion and financial misreporting. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finally refusing to be complicit in a dysfunctional system that had been hurting everyone involved, including ultimately my parents and sister themselves. They had created a house of cards that would eventually collapse. I was simply refusing to be buried in the rubble when it did. The first signs that my actions were having consequences came about 2 weeks after I submitted the anonymous tip, and sent the formal no-contact letter. My phone, which had been blessedly quiet since I blocked their numbers, suddenly lit up with calls from unknown numbers. When I finally answered one, it was my father, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "What have you done?" he demanded without preamble. "The IRS is auditing the business. All our restaurants. They're looking at years of records." "I don't know what you're talking about," I replied calmly. "But I did warn you in my letter not to contact me again." "This isn't about your childish letter," he snapped through with less force than usual. "Someone reported us for tax issues. The only person who would do that is you. You've always been jealous of what we built." "I'm not discussing this with you," I said. "Please don't call this number again." I hung up before he could respond, my hands trembling slightly. I hadn't expected to feel guilty, but a lifetime of conditioning was hard to break. I reminded myself that I hadn't created the financial irregularities. I had simply refused to continue ignoring them. Over the next few days, the calls and messages increased in frequency and desperation. My mother left tearful voicemails about family loyalty. My father's messages grew increasingly threatening, then suddenly shifted to pleas for help. Jasmine sent a particularly vicious email accusing me of destroying the family out of spite. "You've always hated me," she wrote. "You've always been jealous that Mom and Dad loved me more. Now you're trying to ruin everyone because you can't stand that I'm their favorite. You went too far this time, Sophia. Way too far." I didn't respond to any of these messages, though I saved them all as advised by Jackson. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life without the constant drain of toxic family dynamics. I returned to work the following week, where Mr. Richardson had apparently done damage control. My colleagues were professional and compassionate, many quietly expressing support. The Thompsons not only kept their business with us, but referred two friends telling Mr. Richardson they were impressed by how the situation had been handled. Meanwhile, the consequences of the tax investigation were becoming apparent. A mutual family friend called to let me know that my parents had been forced to temporarily close two of their remaining restaurants pending the investigation. Investors were pulling out of planned expansions, and there were rumors of significant penalties looming. Jasmine had apparently been forced to move out of her luxury apartment, unable to make rent without my parents' support, and unwilling to find a job that matched her qualifications, rather than her lifestyle expectations. According to the family grapevine, she had moved in with our parents, creating new tensions in that household. About a month after going no contact, I was surprised to receive a call from my Aunt Margaret, my mother's sister, who had always maintained a respectful distance from family dramas. "I want you to know that I support your decision," she said after we exchanged pleasantries. "What happened at your workplace was inexcusable." "Thank you," I replied, genuinely touched. "It wasn't an easy decision." "Your mother and I were raised to believe that family comes before everything," Margaret continued. "But there's a difference between supporting family and enabling harmful behavior. I've tried to tell your parents this for years regarding Jasmine." "They never listened," I said softly. "No, they didn't. And now they're facing the consequences not just of their financial choices, but of how they've treated you. Eleanor called me crying about how you've abandoned the family in their time of need, but I reminded her that they abandoned your need for respect and boundaries long ago." That conversation was healing in ways I hadn't expected. Knowing that at least one family member understood my perspective helped ease the guilt that still occasionally surfaced. As the weeks passed, my parents' financial situation continued to deteriorate. The tax authorities had found significant discrepancies, resulting in substantial penalties. They were forced to sell their remaining restaurants to cover tax debts and legal fees. Their sprawling Greenwich home was put on the market, and they moved into a modest condo. Jasmine, faced with the collapse of her support system, finally took a job as an administrative assistant at a local real estate office, a position well below what she had always considered acceptable, but matching her actual experience level. She found an apartment with two roommates, a far cry from her luxury Manhattan lifestyle. I maintained my no-contact stance through all of this, though I did anonymously arrange for a grocery delivery service for my parents when I heard they were struggling financially. I couldn't bring myself to abandon them completely to hardship despite everything. That small act of compassion was for my own peace of mind, as much as their well-being. The most unexpected development came shortly before Thanksgiving when my father suffered a minor heart episode, likely stress-related. My mother called from the hospital, leaving a message that was clearly designed to manipulate me into breaking the no-contact boundary. "Your father might be dying," she sobbed into my voicemail. "And his last wish is to see you. How can you be so heartless as to refuse a dying man's request? This is all because of what you did to the business. You've literally broken his heart." I consulted both Taylor and Jackson before responding with a brief text. "I'm sorry to hear about Dad's health issues. I've verified with the hospital that his condition is stable and not life-threatening. I wish him a speedy recovery, but I will not be visiting." It was painful to maintain boundaries in the face of illness, but I knew from past experience that health crises in my family were often exaggerated or used as manipulation tools. True to form, my father was released the next day with instructions to reduce stress and improve his diet. Hardly the dire situation my mother had portrayed. As the holiday season approached, I faced the prospect of my first Christmas without family. While there was sadness in that reality, there was also tremendous relief. No tense dinners where Jasmine received lavish gifts while I got practical items. No subtle digs about my career choices or relationship status. No financial drama or guilt trips. Instead, I accepted an invitation from Taylor and her husband to join their family celebration. I experienced, for perhaps the first time, what a healthy family dynamic looked like during the holidays: genuine warmth, mutual respect, shared responsibility, appreciation for each person's contributions. As the new year began, I received a surprising job offer from a competing financial firm with a substantial increase in salary and responsibility. The professional network I had built over years had paid off with my reputation for integrity and skill, outweighing the single unfortunate incident with my family. Looking back on the previous few months, I realized how much lighter I felt without the constant weight of family obligation and manipulation. My anxiety had decreased. My sleep had improved. I was more present in my friendships and more confident in my professional life. The final communication I received from my family that winter was a lengthy email from my mother, clearly written in a moment of emotional clarity rarely seen before. "I won't pretend to understand or approve of your choices," she wrote, "but as I watch our family business dismantled and our reputation damaged, I can't help but wonder if we brought this on ourselves. Your father would never admit this, and Jasmine still blames you entirely, but I find myself questioning the patterns we established long ago. Perhaps we did favor Jasmine unfairly. Perhaps we did take your strength and independence for granted. This doesn't excuse what you've done, but it may help explain why you felt driven to such extremes." It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest thing to accountability I had ever received from any family member. I didn't respond maintaining the boundaries I had established, but I saved the email as a reminder that even the most entrenched family dynamics can sometimes shift when consequences finally arrive. 6 months have passed since that fateful day when my parents and sister burst into my workplace, triggering the complete restructuring of my relationship with my family. The path hasn't been easy, but it has led to a peace I never imagined possible. The family business is gone now, sold piece by piece to cover the substantial tax penalties and back taxes discovered during the audit. My parents have adjusted to a significantly reduced lifestyle in their two-bedroom condo, a humbling change from the six-bedroom colonial home they once owned. According to mutual friends, my father has taken a consulting position with a restaurant group, while my mother has started teaching Italian cooking classes at a local community center. Jasmine has perhaps undergone the most dramatic transformation. After the initial shock of having her financial support system collapse, she was forced to truly support herself for the first time. She still works as an administrative assistant, but has recently been given additional responsibilities after proving herself reliable, a word I never thought would apply to my sister. She shares an apartment with roommates and has learned to live within a budget, though I hear she still complains about it constantly. When I learned that Jasmine was struggling to furnish her new apartment, I anonymously sent a gift card to a home goods store through a mutual friend. It wasn't about enabling her old behavior. It was about acknowledging her efforts to change, however reluctant those changes might have been. Some part of me will always care about her well-being, despite everything that's happened. My own life has flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. The new job has been challenging and rewarding. I've made genuine friendships with colleagues who respect professional boundaries. I've even started dating someone who understands and supports my decision to maintain distance from my family. Therapy has been an essential part of my healing journey. Working with a professional has helped me recognize the generational patterns of control and favoritism that shaped my family dynamic. I've learned that my parents likely repeated patterns from their own upbringing, particularly my father, whose parents openly favored his younger brother in ways that mirrored how Jasmine was treated. Understanding these patterns doesn't excuse the behavior, but it helps me contextualize it and break free from continuing the cycle. I've learned to recognize when I'm responding from conditioned guilt rather than genuine emotion, and to validate my own experiences without needing external approval. Perhaps the most surprising development came 3 months ago when I received a handwritten letter from my mother. Unlike her previous communications, this one contained no manipulations, no guilt trips, no demands. Instead, it held something I had never truly received from her before: an acknowledgement of harm. "I've been reflecting on our family history," she wrote in her distinctive flowing script, "and I can now see that we did not treat you and Jasmine equally or fairly. We expected too much from you, and too little from her, damaging you both in different ways. While I cannot change the past, I want you to know that I recognize these mistakes. Your father is not ready to have this conversation, but I hope that someday, when wounds are less fresh, we might find a way to build a new relationship based on mutual respect." I haven't responded to this letter yet. I'm not sure if I ever will. The boundaries I've established have been essential to my well-being, and I'm cautious about reopening channels that might lead back to old patterns. But I keep the letter in my desk drawer, a reminder that growth is possible even in relationships that seem permanently damaged. Jasmine, too, has shown small signs of growth. Through mutual connections, I learned that she recently declined a loan offered by a friend, saying she needed to learn to stand on her own feet. It was a small moment, but a significant departure from her lifelong pattern of financial dependence. If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's the importance of establishing and maintaining healthy boundaries, even when doing so is painful. My professional life has recovered and improved since I took control of my personal boundaries. The Morgan Stanley incident, which once seemed catastrophic, is now just an uncomfortable memory overshadowed by my subsequent success. My relationship with money has evolved as well. I still value financial responsibility and independence, but I've learned that these values were partially shaped in reaction to the dysfunction I witnessed growing up. I'm learning to enjoy my success without guilt, to spend on experiences that bring joy, without feeling I must justify every purchase. I've also learned about chosen family, the profound connections we build with friends who respect our boundaries and value us for who we are, not what we can provide. My holiday celebrations now involve people who genuinely enjoy my company, who don't measure love in financial transactions or manipulative obligations. The concept of family legacy has taken on new meaning for me. Instead of preserving a business built on financial irregularities and enabling dysfunction, I'm creating my own legacy based on integrity, mutual respect, and healthy boundaries. This legacy may not involve a chain of restaurants or material wealth to pass down, but it includes something far more valuable: the breaking of unhealthy generational patterns. Do I miss my family sometimes? There are moments when a funny memory surfaces, or when I accomplish something and briefly wish I could share the news. There's a particular pasta dish my mother makes that I've never been able to replicate exactly. There are inside jokes with Jasmine from our childhood, before the favoritism became so pronounced. These moments of nostalgia are natural, but they don't overshadow the peace I've found in separation. What I've realized is that forgiveness doesn't necessarily mean reconciliation. I can wish my family well, hope for their growth and happiness without reestablishing connections that proved consistently harmful. I can acknowledge the complex truth that people can love each other and still be toxic together. For those of you watching who recognize your own family dynamics in this story, know that establishing boundaries isn't selfish. Protecting your well being isn't betrayal. And sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for everyone involved is to step back and allow natural consequences to unfold. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle the guilt that often comes with prioritizing your own well being? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe and hit the like button. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important conversations. Thank you for listening. And remember, the family you choose can be just as meaningful as the family you're born into.